Hi, if you're new here, my name is Maureen, and here we talk about mindset and we talk about manifestation. And today I wanted to chat a little bit about the standards of beauty and this linked to mindset. So, how we constantly feel like we're never enough physically and that we always need to work onto something and we always need to improve a few things. And why is it? Why do we feel this way? There's a reason, and it's not just us. So, this idea came to me, this idea of a subject came to me recently, actually, when I started to feel like I was not as healthy as I could be because I thought that I was just gaining weight. And actually, spoiler alert, I was just bloated most of it. But I started to kind of change the way I was eating because of that. And that was kind of a red flag for me in that moment where I immediately realized that all of my life, I have been trying, not all of my life actually, that is not true. Starting from the age of around, let's say 11, I started to kind of change my behavior and my lifestyle because of the way that I looked and things that I wanted to change. And growing up, I realized it was because of a lot of things. It was because society was actually telling me that I should look a certain way. More specifically, my society. If you do not know, I am coming from France. So there are specific beauty standards in every country, and mine in France are about looking thin and looking, a certain type of way. And I didn't feel like I was fitting that image. And I think it was reinforced by the way that I was reading those magazines for teenagers. By the way, let me tell you, I remember that I first wanted to wax after reading an article for a teenager's girl magazines that was explaining how to basically shave or wax. And in my life, I had never thought about it before. I think I was around 13 years old when I've read this, and I had never thought about this before. So it created a complex in me that didn't exist before. And that's what our society is doing by creating beauty standards, by creating this one mold that everybody should, look forward to get to, even though sometimes it's impossible because maybe the beauty standards is being blonde with blue eyes, let's say, and you have brown hair like me and brown eyes like me, then those things are just unattainable. And this was reinforced definitely by magazines, by movies, by just the world around us, social media specifically. When you see, these specific types of bodies or how people look a certain way, and you start comparing yourselves, because that's what we do as humans. We just compare ourselves to those standards. And one thing I've actually realized is that, again, beauty standards are different in every country. So what does it tell us? It tells us that beauty standards are just created. There's just a social factor in it, that someone suddenly decides that, hey, this is the beauty standards from now on, and that everybody should conform to it or should, strive to attain it. But also, beauty standards are constantly changing. I mean, when we were around in the 2000s or 90s, beauty standards in America, let's say, was to have people who were very thin, almost no forms. And I'm talking mostly about women here. I know there are beauty standards for men. Of course there is, but I am more focusing on women in this sense because women tends to have more beauty standards in general than men. And so in the 2000s, those were the beauty standards. And then came the era of Kim Kardashians, who started to show forms. And, you know, it kind of democratized in this way. And nowadays, beauty standards in America, also in Brazil, is to have a lot of forms. So a kind of generous torso here, generous breasts, a thin waist, and then larger bottom. And you see that throughout the years, if you even look before and way before this, beauty standards were very, very different. And it changed throughout the decades. So it tells us that not only we could never conform, like one person can never have the same beauty standard for the rest of their lives, because it changes from one decade to the other. It's impossible for us to follow through our whole life. So obviously, one way or another, we're gonna have some complex on this. And what is really funny is actually a lot of the complexes are created by drumroll companies. Yes. Did you know that actually women, we do have hair, okay? But I believe it was in the last century when there was this company, I forgot which one it was specifically. There was this razor company that actually was like, oh, okay, yeah, we sell razors to men. Wouldn't it be cool if we could sell razors to women? And so they started to kind of create this complex into women through marketing and advertisement, that women needed to shave their legs and more to conform to that beauty standards. So companies do have the power through advertisement and marketing and propaganda, if I can say, to actually change beauty standards just so that we buy their products. And I've actually recently came across an advertisement that was talking about anti-aging. Did you ever actually notice that anti-aging is mostly for women? And there is this big disparity of beauty standards between men and women. Again, there are beauty standards for men. That is, of course, true, that they feel like they also need to follow. But the pressure, I do really believe, falls mostly onto women. And nowadays, still today, because what could we do in the 50s except stay home, get dressed up, and be and look pleasant for our husbands, right? So this, I believe, still followed us into today's, because companies know that they can make a lot of profits through complexes that we have. If we are trying to stay young all of our lives, there's always going to be something that we will want to do, because obviously we grow old. That's just life. We have wrinkles, like things starts to fall off. Like that's just growing old. That's just how it should be. And I feel like, men are somehow allowed to get old, but women, we always need to look young. And that is a beauty standards, definitely in the West at least, that exists. And that's why we get anti-aging cream, we get like Botox, we get all these plastic surgery, and of course those exist for men as well. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I think a lot of women are going through those methods to fit in the standards. But actually, again, those standards change about every 10 years. How could we possibly follow that? And that's when it really struck me that I can never be the way that I would want to see myself, because that way is always changing. So it's like running after a leopard, right? Like I could never reach it. It will never be enough, because in my mind, it's never enough. It's always changing. So as long as I don't change my mindset about how I look, about me getting older as well, because that's the reality of things, it's a privilege to get older and to be healthy, then as long as I don't change that mindset, I will always be imprisoned in my own mind about how I should look and about the things that I decide to focus on in my body, because I do decide to focus on these things. And just, looking at how society, so looking at social media and looking at all these things that just make me feel like I'm never enough. Why don't I cut cords with this? On my Instagram, in this moment, I follow mostly accounts that are actually about mindset, that, all of this, and not really any accounts where people are posting maybe selfies about their bodies or nothing really that could make me feel like I should compare myself. And that feels good. That feels so good when I'm not comparing physically myself to other people, specifically on social media. As I've mentioned before, when I was younger, I loved women's magazine, like teenagers magazine. I was reading it, and to me it was pretty clear that from a young age we were supposed to do certain things to fit those standards that probably boys didn't have to worry about. And that made me kind of angry, but I entered that mold because I didn't realize at this time. I just thought, hey, this is what everyone is doing, so I should do the same that everyone is doing. But later, when I became an adult, and it took me years to actually realize that maybe this isn't normal. Maybe there's no normal. Maybe the way that I look is simply normal. And there are always people who are going to have a different shape and, look different, a different type of skin, a different type of hair. And there's beauty in difference. Because I personally don't want to look like everyone else. And I mean, like, good for them, because everyone looks good in their own ways. That's why I want to look good in my own way and not according to someone else's way. Because when I actually look myself in the mirror, I actually do think I'm pretty. And I tell myself that I am pretty, that I find myself pretty. And it's an exercise. And right now, if you cannot look yourself in the mirror and tell yourself that you're pretty, then there's maybe a little bit of mindset work to do behind it and things to reframe. Because you are beautiful the way you are right now. And you shouldn't try to fit those standards because, again, impossible to follow the standards. They change all the time. Just look how you look. Feel good. And if you want to wear makeup, wear makeup. If you just want to stay the way you are, stay the way you are. But that's one thing that I've understand being in the workout world, if I can say. I am someone who loves working out, who enjoys sports, like all kind of sports. And one thing that I've really learned in this area is that I cannot have the same body than someone else. So while I do admire someone else having this type of body, I realized that, hey, this is my bone structure. I cannot look any thinner or bigger than this because I do have a certain bones. Like, I'm not gonna remove my bones for this. That would just not make sense to me. So let's ourselves live the way we want to. Let ourselves enjoy a pizza here and there if we want to. If we have a certain texture of skin, we should just, let it be just. And I know it's hard sometimes to accept the skin because I do have a bit of hormonal acne in the moment. So I do understand what people are going through when they're not looking the way they want to. But it's okay to also accept that you're looking this way and that it will get better eventually. But I shouldn't prevent myself from living my life or feeling the way that I want to feel just because of those physical features that I have in the moment. But they don't define me. They don't define my personality of who I am, because if I'm beautiful inside, I'm beautiful outside. And I know it sounds very corny and cheesy, but we're always beautiful or ugly for someone in this world. So I promise you, people like different things. You know, everybody likes different body shapes. Everybody likes different hair color, different face texture. And I think you realize that when you start to grow older. I think when we're teenagers or in our early 20s, we're really focused on looks. And, it's a little bit shallow, but for some reason, when we grow up and we have life experiences, we realize that maybe, just maybe, people can be very interesting despite the way they look, and they can look very beautiful despite maybe looking a certain type of way that I might not find attractive at first. Like, it probably happened to you that you've met someone and you're like, not necessarily in a romantic way, but you've met someone and you're just like, oh, this person doesn't physically look really good. But then you start talking to them and they're so interesting. They have so much charisma that suddenly you're like, ho, I can see that. Like, yeah, they're pretty attractive. It means something. It means that, again, we're always attractive or not attractive for someone in this world. But we should find ourselves attractive no matter what. And we shouldn't seek external validation of some beauty standards around us just because we think we should. No, the validation comes from inside first. Because it doesn't matter what anyone would tell you. If you're looking for attention, for approval of how you look, you will never be satisfied. It will never be enough because inside you don't feel like you're enough. And that's the most important part of the mindset with beauty standards. The only standards you should have are for yourself. That's it. That's all that should matter. All right, that's all for me today. I do hope that you're staying safe here and that you really start loving yourself physically because you deserve it, because you are beautiful inside and outside, that I'm sure of. So really start taking care of yourself. Really start paying attention to what you're saying to yourself as well. And just live your best life. That's all I want for you throughout this channel, is to help you to just live the best life that you can just by being yourself. It's all that matters. So I do hope that this video helped you. And if it did, please put some comments. Subscribe to the channel. It really helps the channel. And I will see you soon. Bye.